Life for the disciplined top 1% has been more productive than it has ever been. And for the other 99%, it's more challenging and distracting than ever before. What separates these two groups isn't talent or luck. It's specific discipline rules that the top 1% follow religiously. I've used these exact rules to post consistently on YouTube for 10 months despite very slow growth, and develop habits at 18 that most people struggle to build even in their late 20s. Without further explaining, these are the 5 rules of the top 1%. Rule number 1. The 80-20 rule of discipline. The top 1% understand that not all disciplined actions are equal. They focus their willpower and energy on the vital 20% of activities that produce 80% of their results. Here's the thing. Most people burn out trying to be disciplined at everything, spreading themselves so thin across many areas. Sound familiar? I discovered this when I started my YouTube channel without knowing anything about content creation. Instead of getting overwhelmed by the technical aspects I didn't understand, I focused on just 2 things: showing up consistently to film and improving by about 1% with each upload. By focusing my discipline on these vital few activities, I was able to post over 78 videos with very slow growth, while most beginners quit after uploading a few videos that didn't perform as well as they wanted it to. This same principle transformed my approach to fitness. Instead of trying to perfect every single aspect of my fitness journey, I focused my discipline on consistently showing up to the gym, progressive overload, and avoiding junk food. These discipline habits produce most of my results while requiring very little willpower. Let me ask you, what area of your life are you trying to improve where you might be spreading yourself too thin? And if you are comfortable, you can share it down below. Most people make the mistake of treating all actions as equally important, which leads them to decision fatigue and eventual burnout. To apply this rule yourself, first identify which 20% of activities in any area of your life produce 80% of your results. For school, it might be active recall and spaced repetition. For building muscle, it might be progressive overload and avoiding processed foods. For productivity, it might be phone discipline and a morning routine. Then, ruthlessly focus your discipline on those vital few activities rather than trying to be perfect at everything. This is how the top 1% achieve more while actually using less willpower than everyone else. Before we move into rule number 2, if you've been gaining value so far, I'd appreciate it if you can become a subscriber of this channel. It helps more than you know. But even when you focus on the right activities, sometimes motivation is still not enough. Which brings us to rule number 2, the minimum viable progress rule. The top 1% understand that consistency beats intensity every single time. They don't rely on motivation or perfect days. They focus on making minimum viable progress no matter what. Most people take an all or nothing approach to discipline, which sets them up for failure right from the start. They think if I can't have a perfect workout, they skip the gym completely. If they can't resist social media for a whole day, they don't bother trying. I learned this the hard way with my own discipline journey. When I first tried building discipline, I would set massive goals like completely transforming my phone habits overnight or never missing a workout. Inevitably, I would fail, feel terrible, and go back to square one. Everything changed when I discovered the minimum viable progress approach. Instead of saying, I'll post a perfect video every week, I committed to filming something. Anything, even if it was just me talking for 5 minutes. When I couldn't focus on a task because I kept thinking about checking my phone, I'd set a timer for just 10 minutes of phone-free work. On days when gaming with friends seems more appealing than working on my goal, I'd commit to just 15 minutes of productive work first. These minimum actions kept my habits alive and build an identity of someone who shows up consistently. Here's the key insight. Once you start, you almost always do more than the minimum. But the minimum prevents you from doing nothing. So apply this to your life. For every habit you are building, define your non-negotiable minimum. Something so small that you can do it even on your worst days. For breaking phone addiction, it might be 20 minutes of phone-free time. For fitness, it might be 10 push-ups before gaming. For creating anything, it could be working on it for just 5 minutes. The top 1% know that maintaining the habit is more important than any single day's performance. This approach works because it's the small actions repeated consistently that compound over time, not the occasional heroic efforts. But even with the minimum viable progress, there's still a problem. How do you keep showing up day after day when things get boring and repetitive? That's where rule number 3 comes in. the boredom threshold principle. The top 1% have developed an extraordinary ability that most people lack, which is the ability to stay consistent when things get boring. Most people quit when the excitement wears off and the repetition sets in. The harsh reality is that anything worth mastering will become boring before it becomes rewarding. When I first started posting on YouTube, making videos was exciting and new, but around video 20, that excitement wore off, and I was left with the boring reality of filming, scripting, and editing the same content over and over again. This is exactly where most people quit, when they realize that success in anything, and I mean anything worth being proud of, requires doing the same core tasks hundreds or even thousands of times, sometimes without even seeing any positive result. You've probably experienced this yourself. Maybe you started learning a new skill and you got bored of practicing the basics repeatedly. Or you began a new habit and got tired of the daily repetition. I noticed this in my own journey. There were weeks when I posted videos that barely got any views. I would put in hours of work for seemingly no reward. The top 1% understand that boredom is actually a test. It's the barrier that separates those who will achieve their goals and those who won't. Look, when you feel bored with your disciplined actions, it's not a sign to quit. It's actually a sign that you're on the right track. Mastery requires repetition, and let's be honest, repetition is plain boring. Every successful person I've studied has developed a higher threshold for boredom. They're willing to do the basic repetitive tasks that others avoid. To develop this ability yourself, start recognizing that boredom is normal. When you feel that urge to quit when something is no longer exciting, I want you to remind yourself that this is where growth actually happens. Try creating small challenges within repetitive tasks. Can you improve your form slightly with each workout? Can you make each video just a little bit better than the previous one? This micro improvement keeps you engaged while still doing the necessary repetitions. Another strategy is to measure your boredom threshold like a muscle. Start by doing boring but necessary tasks for just 10 minutes and gradually increase the duration. The secret most people don't realize is that pushing through boredom actually becomes easier over time as your brain adapts to sustained focus. But even with a high boredom threshold, discipline can still fail when you're obsessed with outcomes rather than systems. Which brings us to rule number 4, the process orientation rule. The top 1% understand that discipline isn't about focusing on the outcomes. It's about falling in love with the process. Most people approach discipline with an outcome mindset. They focus entirely on the results they want to achieve. They say things like, I want to get 6-pack abs, I want to become famous, or I want to make $1 million. The problem is that outcome focus actually makes discipline harder, not easier. When you are obsessed with results, every day without visible results make you feel like a failure, which drains your motivation. I've fallen into this trap myself. At one point, I was completely focused on the numbers and results of my efforts. Whenever I put in work that didn't show immediate results, my motivation dropped and staying disciplined became a struggle. Everything changed when I shifted my focus from the outcomes to the process itself. Instead of obsessing over results, I started asking, did I improve from yesterday? Did I give my best effort? Did I provide more value? This shift transformed my relationship with discipline. On days when I didn't see the results I wanted, I could still feel successful because I had followed my process and improved my craft. You see the same pattern with most disciplined people in any field. They don't wake up thinking about the distant goal. They wake up thinking about the process they will follow that day. Athletes focus on proper form and training protocols, not just the medal. Writers focus on their daily word count, not bestseller lists. Entrepreneurs focus on creating value, not just profit. So apply this rule in your life. Take whatever goal you're pursuing and break it down into a daily process that you can control. If you want to get in shape, your process might be, I will do 30 minutes of focused exercise and avoid junk food today. If you want to improve your social skills, your process might be, I will start one meaningful conversation today. Then, judge your success by how well you follow the process, not immediate results. This works because processes are entirely within your control, while outcomes often aren't. You can control whether you go to the gym, but you can't directly control how fast you build muscle. You can control whether you create content, but can't control if people engage with it. Discipline becomes much easier when you fall in love with the process because you find daily wins in the actions themselves. But there's still one problem to solve. Even with the perfect process, sometimes life gets overwhelming and discipline fails. That's what rule number 5 addresses: the strategic recovery method. The top 1% understand something most disciplined people miss. Recovery isn't the opposite of discipline. It's an essential part of it. Most people, myself included, approach discipline with the all or nothing mindset, pushing themselves constantly until they eventually burn out. We think taking breaks is a sign of weakness, so we grind non-stop until our mind and body force us to stop due to illness, exhaustion, and complete loss of motivation. I've repeatedly seen this pattern with people who start strong but cannot maintain their discipline in the long run. What separates the top 1% is that they are just as disciplined and intentional about their recovery as they are about their work. Elite athletes don't just train. They're very careful about their rest days, sleep quality, and recovery routines. Top performers in any field understand that strategic recovery enhances discipline rather than weakening it. I learned this the hard way when I tried to be disciplined at everything at once, all the time with no breaks. I'd go weeks with perfect gym attendance, strict phone discipline, and consistent content creation, then crash completely and lose all momentum. When I started building strategic recovery into my discipline routine, everything changed. I began scheduling deliberate rest periods, 1 day a week with no structured work, or times I could catch up on all that lost sleep. When that sleep need builds up a lot, it doesn't end well, at least for me. This wasn't random or reactive rest when I felt burnt out. It was a proactive planned recovery that prevents burnout in the first place. The key insight is that willpower is a renewable resource, but it needs time to recharge. To apply this in your life, identify what truly recharges you. Not just mindless scrolling, but activities that genuinely restore your energy and motivation. For some people like me, it's walking or sleeping. For others, it's social time with friends or creative hobbies. Then, deliberately schedule these recoveries as non-negotiable parts of your weekly routine. The recovery period should be guilt-free zones where you fully disconnect from your discipline pursuits. This approach allows you to maintain high discipline for months and years, not just days or weeks. Remember, discipline isn't a sprint. It's a marathon that lasts your entire life. The top 1% aren't necessarily working harder than everyone else every single day. They're working smarter and more consistently over the long run by balancing intense effort with strategic recovery. Look, I know applying these rules isn't always easy, especially when you're having one of those days that nothing seems to work. We all have them. But even with these 5 rules, actually staying disciplined on your worst days can still be challenging. That's why in this video, how to actually stay disciplined on your worst days, I'll show you my exact strategies when motivation is completely gone. Remember, the path is yours to walk, and as always, I'm in your corner rooting for you.